have your Bibles tonight. I apologize, coming in smelly and stinky, and I left the football field. We had a scrimmage and came straight here. And my wife made me wear pants, so I was in my shorts. I know it. I'm telling you, I'm nasty. So, any prayer requests tonight as we get started?
I'll take a double dose.
Double dose, how are you doing?
Right now, I'm good.
Okay. Also, I got a message today from Bob and Norman. Bob's been having problems. They took him to the kidney doctor today, and undoubtedly they're going to have to do some type of surgery, procedure on him at some point. So they're waiting to get the phone call to get all that set up. So, any others?
Well, Mike, our grandson in Texas needs back surgery real bad, and the insurance company doesn't want to approve it. He's in a lot of pain. His name's Adam.
Okay. So that's what Frank said.
Lisa Brewer,
Lisa Brewer.
she got bit by a copperhead. It was on her foot, and she's had a lot of issues with it.
She's still in hospital.
No, she is at home. She's at home, and but she's had a problem with her foot. It caused some issues, cellulitis and infection, and she can't walk on it.
Any others? All right. Robert, you care to open us in prayer, please?
Lord, we give you thanks for the opportunity tonight we can come study your word, Lord, and just be with us, open our hearts and minds, be receptive to your word. One's been mentioned, Lord, on the sick, their faith, and give us peace and come and allow them, heal them, bring them back to us, Lord. Father, we just give you the thanks for everything you've done for us. Thank you for your grace and salvation. Thank you for the Son that died on the cross for our sins, Lord. We ask this thing in precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen. Fundraiser up here at the fire department. Friday, they're doing lunch at 12 o'clock all the way through 7 o'clock, the barbecue pork and chicken. Baked beans, slaw, roll, and all that. It's for to help support our 2nd District Volunteer Fire Department. And they had actually came out and helped us with the house up here. And when they had the fire. And they really helped a lot with that. So if you get a chance Friday, men, take your wives out or come here and provide supper and swing by there. And, surprise them. All right, Genesis chapter 24. I'll tell you what, Rick, are you the one that's smelling up here? Because somebody's smelling. Kind of bum. I'm sitting there while Robert's praying. I'm going, daggone, it's either me or Rick stinking. I don't know. Genesis chapter 24. We're going to finish up tonight with our study through Abraham and dealing with faith to move forward. As far as that we are to be growing, we need to be seeking, we need to be moving in the right direction. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that we'll never make mistakes. It doesn't mean that we'll never have those rut row moments. But we see with the life of Abraham that we have to have faith. Without faith, what does the Bible say? Without faith, it's impossible to what? To please God. So we're to be acting in faith. I think North America churches, and here in the United States, we have a hard time with that. A lot of times because it's not like our lives are depending on whether or not we go to church, if we're going to live or die, or people threatening us, to come in and mass shootings and torture. When you look at Christianity overseas, Christianity's thriving. But it's thriving in the hardest places that you could ever imagine, that they're operating in faith. Here, How many of us have been around church 2/3 to most of our lives? Okay, I mean, big majority here, most of us. We've been around church most of our lives. You know, it's harder here for some reason because we get complacent. Oh, we need somebody to go back there. Hey, Robbie, you care to go back there and open up? That's right. We charge more on Wednesdays. Charge more. Actually, we lock that door to keep worry out. I don't know how he's thinking. That's it. All right. Anyway, it's harder for us, it seems, in the United States as churches to operate in faith because we're so accustomed to having everything at our disposal. We're so accustomed to not having to really need for anything. Now, we may want for a lot of things in our individual lives, but a lot of times we don't really need, you know? And if we do, it's usually a phone call away. So I think that hinders us a lot. You know, the blessings that God's given us, sometimes the blessings has become a hindrance in some ways. So we have to make sure that we're moving forward in faith. The greatest way you can guarantee that Nelson Chapel, and we want all the other churches to operate in faith, but we can't make their choices for them. The greatest way you can make sure that Nelson Chapel operates in faith is that you personally operate in faith, that you personally move forward, that you're personally growing, that you're personally seeking God. Because then, as a church body, when we're doing that, when God leads in the big stuff, it's not going to be that big. I mean, it may be big, but it's not like a big decision. We just say yes. So we're growing in our faith, and faith to move forward. And the theme verse is chapter 15, verse 6 in Genesis. And it's talking about Abraham. It says, and he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. The reason that Abraham was so close to God, he was considered a friend, was because he was just faithful and obedient. As we pick up with the family, Genesis chapter 24, we're actually going to look at the longest chapter in the book of Genesis. Now, Genesis contains a lot. But this is the longest chapter that we have in the book. And it's not the creation, but it deals with the marriage and how Isaac got his wife. And the reason it's such a long chapter, I believe, is that it teaches us separation. Abraham emphasized that Isaac was not to marry a Canaanite. Now, we can apply that as Christians, you know. It's hard, but we need to marry folks of like faith. I think we would all agree with that. Because if we marry someone that's a non-believer, it's just total chaos. I mean, you're not going in the same direction. And God has those people picked out. That's another sermon series, I guess. But as we see with Isaac, he has somebody for us. But we see the significance of Isaac because he's actually the living link in the chain between Abraham and Christ's birth. So this is important for this chapter. And I think as a servant, we see that there was a servant that's going to be mentioned. We may skip past it a little bit, but Abraham brought a servant in and asked him, you know, you need to go, and this is where you need to go, and you need to find a lady for my son. As he was praying, God, you know, the servant was actually in the scripture tonight. He was praying, and as he just pretty much finished that praying, boom, God brought Rebekah. And it's amazing God's timing and how he works. That's why we trust in God, not necessarily ourselves. And let's look at Rebekah for just a moment. Verse 58 in chapter 24. We're going to look at a few things about Rebekah tonight. One thing that she had to do is that Rebekah had to make a choice. Verse 58 says, and they called Rebekah. Now we're picking up kind of after the fact that the servant met Rebekah, asked to go visit with the family, and, said, hey, we need her. We want her to go marry Isaac, and all these things. So this is kind of where we're picking up with it. And they called Rebekah and said unto her, wilt thou go? This is her family. Wilt thou go with this man? And she said, I will go. She had a choice to make. Now, she probably heard a little bit about Isaac and about his family, but she had no clue. I mean, she had a little bit of knowledge. And I'm sure she's probably like others. It's important days for men, but women especially, they're always, when they're young, they think of the wedding and all the things that go with it. And all that stuff. That's why we tell work now, elope. Elope. Cheaper to pay for the elopement, amen? But anyway, Rebekah had a choice. Even though she didn't know all the details, she felt it was the right thing to do. God will work in your life. She had no idea that this was going to take place that day. She went to the well to draw water. No idea. And God just interrupted her day. That's why it's important as Christians, whenever we're walking by faith, that when God interrupts our day, it's not because He's being mean or wanting to pile stuff on our plate. It's because He's getting ready to do something, and we get to be a part of that. And so we see that here she had to make a choice. Because she had stayed at home. Nobody's forcing her. She wasn't at gunpoint. So she had to make a choice. But not only that, look in verse 59. It says, and they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse. And when it talks about her nurse right here, it's like with their family, they had a nurse in the family that took care of her from when she was born and just all the way up. So they sent her with her, and Abraham's servant and his men. She not only had a choice to make, but she was willing to change. Some of us don't like change, do we? I didn't like it tonight when I was talking to my wife, and she said, are you going home to change? I said, no. I said, I'm going with shorts and I'm stinky. Because I just left the football field. She said, you're not wearing the shorts up there. You're wearing a pair of pants. I said, well, how dare you, woman? How dare you? And guess what? I got my pants on tonight. I pulled in, I seen Mike White's legs, I saw, whoa, mercy. Cover him up, cover him up. We got a tarp out there, Mike, if you need some help. But we don't like change in our lives. Churches are notorious for that. Ask any pastor. If they'll tell you the honest truth, that's one of the hardest things they ever struggle with. Churches don't want to change. We like it just the way it's always been. Well, guess what? You can't stay with God. You can't be where God wants you to be and never change. Now, there's some things that never change. Our doctrine, our theology, the Word, our beliefs. But it's more practical things. It's more how we put into practice things. So it's always going to change. Guess what? When we're dead and gone, they're going to do things here at Nelson's Chapel different than the way we do it. Well, the nerve of them. Well, let's just not die. Or do like my great granny said one time when I was aggravating her, and she hated the color red. Very spiritual lady. I mean, she loved the Lord and all this stuff. And I was aggravating her one day. I said, Granny, I'll tell you one thing. I said, you mess with me. I said, I'll have them bury you in a red dress. So she come unglued. She said, if you do that, I'll come back and hang you. Now, that ain't haunting, that's hanging. So I looked at her, I said, Granny, I tell you what, you try to come back and hang me, I'll tell them to bury you naked. I never seen a little 75-pound woman just wearing me out. So she got all up in my face. Tore her up. But here we understand there's going to be changes. There's going to be changes to our lifestyle. This is a great picture of how salvation works. Whenever we are saved, we're willing to walk away from what we know. We're willing to walk away from a lifestyle of what we know, of what we do, how we act, for a different lifestyle. Whenever we grow as Christians, we ought to be willing. Whenever Abraham got to this point, it didn't just happen that Abraham woke up one morning and said, all right, it's time for Isaac to marry. No. Abraham's been through a journey. He wasn't always right. He didn't always make the right choices, but he was willing to leave his home initially, back a few chapters ago. In order for him to get to where he was at now, he had to change. Be willing to allow God. And here we see Rebekah. She was leaving her life, her friends, her family, everything she knew. The things that were most important to her. And she had not even met Isaac yet. But she is willing to make the choice. She was willing to make the change. Verse 61 says, and Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode upon the camels and followed the man. And the servant took Rebekah and went his way. It's easy to think about the wedding. Oh, yeah, I'd like to marry this guy. It's easy to think about changing. Well, I know that I'm going to have to, make some adjustments. But now she's pulling away from the family. That entourage of people's leaving, and she's with them, and the reality sets in. Sometimes reality is scary. Sometimes it's scary. But here we see she had a commitment, even though she didn't understand it all. That's the same way it is with being obedient to Christ. We have committed ourselves to Him, but we have to remain committed even if we don't understand it all. Even if it doesn't quite make sense. Now, we'll fast forward a little bit as their entourage. They're making their way back. It's not like she just hopped on a plane and that afternoon she got to see Isaac. People tell us that when the servant left to go and find where Rebekah was and the trip back, that was about 2 months. Round trip for the servant. A month of traveling. It was estimated between, I think, 850 and 900 miles. Round trip. So Rebekah had to make half that trip. About a month, give or take. Depends on how fast the camel moved. There's a big group of them. Through that whole time, can you imagine the devil just, I mean, I would. I'm sure he'd do that to us. Ever getting down a little bit and all that. But imagine the scene, if you will, as they come up. They see this guy up here on the hill. The guy's actually there, just looks like he's asleep at first, but he's actually praying. He's actually praying about all these things that's going to take place in his life. And he looks up, and there's the entourage, the group. You see, Isaac had moved away from home. And Rebekah asked to be set down, and she got down, and she went and met Isaac. Then right after that, they were married. Love at first sight. But it's neat to see that they were both being obedient to the Lord. And that Isaac was praying as they came up. Lessons that we learn throughout this study, throughout the series of Faith to Move Forward, is that in times of testing, it's easy to think about just our needs, our burdens, isn't it? Things go bad. Things at work, things at home, health, kids, whatever it may be, whatever that testing is, It's always easy to focus in on our problems, on our burdens. Instead, and this is hard, but instead we ought to be focusing on how my burden can bring glory to God. How can my burden that I'm going through right now, how can my test, my trial, how can that bring glory to God? We always ask the hows and whys. You know, we're always thinking that. But how's this going to honor God? Usually if it's something bad, what do? We kind of feel bad, feel sorry for ourselves. Y'all ever had the pity patty parties for yourself? Oh, they're good, ain't they? They really are. If they weren't good and fun, we would never do them. We'll get droopy lip. We'll get sad. Oh, poor it's me. And I mean, I can make my list of why my life is so terrible, and we get so internalized that we forget that yes, God has allowed it to happen, but how can God get honor out of this? It goes back to spiritual growth. It goes back to maturity, maturing in our faith, moving forward. Another thing we can learn throughout this study is that when situations seem hopeless, ask yourself this question. Whenever it seems hopeless, there's just no way Michael can get out of this. No way this can ever get fixed. No way I can ever deal with this. When it seems hopeless, ask yourself this question. Is there anything too big for God? Is there anything too big for God? Is there anything too big? You say, well, preacher, you just don't know. No, I don't understand. I may not understand what you're going through. Is there anything too big for God? You see, we tend to get a little selfish, don't we? We tend to, like I was talking to somebody the other day, and they was talking about something that was going on in their life. And through the course of a conversation, it was me, I, me, I, me, me. Everything was focused on them. Everything. And I understand it happens. But it has to be focused on God. We have to refocus. When does God meet our needs? In His timing. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I don't like His timing. I may be the only one here. But sometimes I don't like His timing. I wish it would work faster. I wish certain things would not happen. I wish certain issues did not take place in our lives. I don't like timing like that. I don't like it when He don't give me instantaneous results. Good nerve I feel. Can you believe that? But He answers and meets our needs. He meets our needs in His timing. And last of all, as we close, trusting God is one of the most essential aspects of spiritual growth. Everything hinges on that. And when you stop and think about it, trusting God, really everything about spiritual walks hinges on that. Because when we were saved, who did we trust in? You know? So as we grow, who do we still trust in? That's the key question, because a lot of times we trust in ourselves more when we need to trust in God. We allow emotions to get into it. Have you ever met somebody and you knew they just made a bad choice or something going on, and me, 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 I. Okay? Not that we've never done that, okay, but other people have. All right? We still do that with God. I mean, there's some things it's just plain clear. But I feel this way. My heart tells me this. Your heart may be telling you that, but the Lord's heart ain't. We can't base our spiritual walk on emotions. Yes, we're emotional people. Yes, there's great things about emotions. But we can't rely just on emotions to be spiritually mature. That's what gets us in trouble. And I've been there. Spiritual growth. Trusting God's essential. I guess the question we've all got to ask ourselves at times is, who do we trust more? Who in your life do you go to for advice? I mean, surely we all at least have one person maybe we go to in our life, that's alive. I remember one time I had a young teenager in church, and first church I pastored out of seminary. We were talking one day about a decision coming up and going to college. And I hadn't been to church maybe a month. And he said, Mike, I went and talked to such and such today. And I said, well, man, that's great. What? Tell me about it. And he began to tell me. And I said, well, what did he say? And he said, well, it's hard to put into words. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, Papa died a while back. I understood that his grandfather was a very important figure in his life. But let's get real. You're not going to get spiritual guidance from driving by a cemetery like that. And I'm not trying to be mean. And we walked through that. We talked about that. He said, Mike, I understand. And I understood what he's talking about. I really did. I wasn't poking or making fun or anything. I mean, I understood what he was talking about. But it's like sometimes we come up with our own reasoning. And we can reason it enough in our minds where we think it's true, when it's polar opposite of what he says here. Have you ever had or met a extremely stubborn person? Kid, this is the time to keep quiet, okay? Don't say a word. Don't say a word. Characteristics of a stubborn person. Unwilling, unyielding. What else? Yeah, keep quiet. What else? Hard-headed. Are you testifying, Nancy, or are you?
No, I'm very good.
Oh, okay. Just making sure we all on the same page. We'll get her calmed down back there. You know what I found, and I've done it myself? Sometimes I get stubborn with God. Sometimes when what I'm doing doesn't line up with His Word, I get stubborn. I justify it. Pick and choose my verses. I've been in church long enough. I can do that pretty easy. I mean, we can always find a verse to back up our choice for some reason. But you can take anything out of context. Don't get stubborn with God. You ever seen the kids at the mall and you think, man, my kids will never act like that. You ever seen those kids swallowing, hollering and throwing a fit? Yeah. And then it's not too many years down the road, you're the parent of the swallowing kid. Sometimes I think we throw temper tantrums on God. That's not what He wants. As churches, that's not what he wants, as a church family. This is what he wants. He reveals his desire or direction, whatever we want to call it, his will. He reveals the next step. We're obedient to trust him. Then the next step. Then the next step. Then the next step. And before long, those steps, I mean, they get huge. Do you think God will entrust great things to churches that are unfaithful to him? He's never blessed his obedience, and he's not going to start on anybody's account. That's why we always need to seek and be obedient, be growing. When you go to, I remember with the kids growing up, and it seemed like Jamie and them done this when they were kids at her grandmother's house. And the kids was growing up, and every so often they would go and they'd put their feet, stand up against the door or the little wall thing, and what would you do? You just mark where they're at, put their initial, mark where they're at, put their initial. Well, you know what happened every time we put the kids up? They kept growing. What would happen if they went backwards? Something's wrong, or they're not growing. Where's your spiritual growth? If you kind of had it started. You making progress, or you getting kind of pushed back? All right, heads bowed and eyes closed tonight as we close. Always remember that the Lord loves you. When he leads you and guides you, it's for your betterment. We're not to serve God based on explanations. We're to serve him based on his promises that he makes to us as his children. If you're not growing spiritually, something's wrong. There's a heart problem there. And it usually ends up being a sinful problem. Ask God tonight if you're moving forward or if you're falling back in your spiritual walk. Father, tonight, we stand amazed at how you can use ordinary people in extraordinary ways. Thank you for the examples that we have of people in Scripture that are just like us, human. But we can look at their lives and see, even though they weren't perfect, even though they didn't make all the correct choices, that Father, you desire to live among us and use us. And teach us again as Christians and churches to have faith in you. Help us to be the generation that you use to set the example for all of our children to follow. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys, I'm going to cut it off early. Rick is starting to smell even worse up here. So, golly, bum. Thank y'all for being here. Guess we will see everybody Sunday. Remember Beatrice in the back. Okay, remember.